Welcome back to Metropole Business Center. Now, the past couple of years, I would say a few years, have seen a lot of startups sprout up on the continent, and this has been matched with the kind of amount of VC funding that is coming to the continent to support startups. In line with that, we've also seen a lot of accelerator programs to support startups and really tap into the needs of startups come onto the continent. So again, like I promised before we took a break, if you're a startup, today we're here to talk about this. And today I have a representative from Startup Bootcamp in Afritech Accelerator program, none other than Jocelyn Nyangusi, who's the marketing lead, to talk to us about the Accelerator program as well as the startup space on the continent. You're welcome to the show, Jos.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. Now, to just get into it, and to make reference to that small intro that I made, what's your perception of the startup ecosystem on the continent right now? Are we seeing a lot more innovations coming out of the continent? And from where you're seated, what would you say is even driving all of this?
So I think Africans generally are solving problems, and the great thing that is happening now is that there's funding for it. So need funding within Africa and outside of Africa, especially Silicon Valley. People are adopting Silicon Valley principles into their businesses, trying to solve problems innovatively. So the ecosystem right now is buzzing. There's so much happening. There's so much money. There's so many exits. So it's very exciting.
So with that being said, I would like to quickly tie into the work that you're doing, and that's the Startup Bootcamp Afritech Accelerator program. For the audience back at home who's trying to understand exactly what it is that you do, help us understand your mandate and what do you do in this startup space?
Okay, so our mandate is to scout, skill, and scale African startups. And so what we do is we look for early stage tech startups that are really looking to break out into the global ecosystem. So what we do is we empower them. We take them through a 3-month program that helps them understand lean methodologies, business models, and also helps them build sustainable business models. So apart from that, we also partner with a lot of corporates. We have a big corporate startup collaboration mandate, and through that, we help these startups build sustainable models and connect with corporates and actually get contracts that are long lasting. So that way they can have sustainable businesses and profitable businesses.
And just with that being said, and also staying in line with a statement you just made where you said as Startup Bootcamp Afritech Accelerator program, you work with startups when it comes to skilling and scaling. A lot of people that I've talked to in the startup space tend to think that the biggest challenge for startups is finance. So a lot of people who come in to help startups usually come in in that direction of, finance. And yet here you are saying we're bringing something different on board. So if you could talk to us directly in line with that, maybe some of the other underlooked challenges that startups face, and in line with that, the sort of value you're bringing, why is it so important for a startup?
It is important. Okay, so in terms of that, the biggest thing that I think the misconception is that when you start your business, the first thing you need is funding. It's not really correct because there's so much preparation that comes before you are actually ready to accept funding and use it the right means. So what we do at Startup Bootcamp is we help these startups understand the principles that they need to have before they can open themselves to funding. So I've seen that a lot of the startups that we work with are struggling with talent as well. So talent is a big deal, and they're also struggling with finding their product market fit. So what we do also, we try to help you pivot or find the right products that your customers need. And to help us do that, we have anchor partners like AWS, we have Google helping us, but our main anchor partner right now is Teleso Group, and Teleso Group is a telecommunications company that is the back end of many of our large telecoms networks. So what they do is they help these startups also build pilots and test their subjects, test their business models on a smaller scale before they can scale them. So yeah, it's very important. The ecosystem has so many moving parts, and funding is only just a little bit of the things that you need.
And I would like to talk about the startups that you're particularly targeting. I know you said your main focus is on early stage tech startups. I'd like you to give us a little more detail on that, like maybe why particularly tech, and when you talk about early stage, what exactly does that mean? And also which countries on the continent can actually tap into your resource?
Okay, so I'll start with the last questions. The last question, all the countries on the continent can tap into what we're doing. All we need is an early stage startup that has a little bit of traction. So you have moved from your idea stage, you've built your minimum viable product, and you're looking to find ways in which you can increase your audience, increase your client base. So that's what we mean by early stage. And we focus on tech particularly because tech tech makes the world go round. Now we know that everything revolves around tech. Without tech, you can't do much. For financial inclusion, you need tech. So everything needs to be tech enabled for us to assist you. So yes, that's what we do.
So, Jules, I would like to ask you categorically mentioned that the ecosystem is buzzing right now. There's so much going on, and now is actually a good time to be a startup. However, we see a situation where there's some startups that are really, really thriving, and then there are some that are still struggling, only just trying to get their footing. So the question is, as someone who's in this space, those who are doing it and doing it right, what are they doing differently that ideally maybe other startups, key lessons that they can pick, and also the kind of value, maybe the programs that you're offering as your Accelerator program?
So I think the good thing that most of the startups are doing that makes them thrive so much, your Flutterwave, Trade Depot, is that they are going beyond borders. And so they are harnessing networks, they're building things that are applicable to multiple revenues, multiple people, and that helps in them scaling and being successful. So a lot of the time we feel like people are really struggling. It's just an issue of product market fit, as I mentioned. So you might not even need funding if you really do your business right, if you really have the right contracts, the right connections. So really taking a grasp of your networks and exhausting what you already have and building with that in mind. So as we mentioned before, it's not funding that you need most of the time initially. Initially, you need to actually prove your product and grow it in a way that is sustainable, in a way where you are actually funding yourself before you start looking for funds for you to scale.
So, just I feel like we cannot have this conversation without talking about the aspect of policy, and this could also talk about, encompass somehow regulation. Since we're seeing a lot more startups thrive and, a lot more interest even from the diaspora, would you say the policies in place, and I could talk about put in place by local governments, are much more favorable? What would you say about the policies, and also as you participating in this space, what would you say about the policy? Is it where it needs to be, or does it need a little bit of tweaking?
There's a little bit of tweaking that's needed, but I think the incredible thing is we're seeing a lot of other countries adopting what is called startup acts. So we are working with a government organization in Senegal. So they're the entrepreneurship arm of the Senegalese government, and Senegal was the second country to get a startup act. And it's really impressive how they are tweaking their policies in order to really accommodate startups and early stage founders. And I see that also happening in South Africa and all these other countries that are really trying to make things conducive for talent and innovation to thrive.
So let's talk about the pandemic, because in this day and age, it's almost impossible to talk about, carrying out business, e-commerce without talking about the kind of impact the pandemic has had. So with that being said, what would you say has the pandemic, the sort of impact on how startups are operating? How have they had to shift mindset, if at all, to fit into the current realities? And also how has that trickled down into the work that you do?
Okay, so in essence, I feel like startups were already prepared for something like a pandemic because they already do things that they're very adaptable, if I can say that. So I feel like corporates or these big organizations are the ones who really struggled. A lot of startups work from home. You do remote work all the time. And for us at Startup Bootcamp, because we are also a startup in different ways, we had to develop a hybrid program where a lot of the courses that people undertake are online, and then we complement with physical things that the startups need to do. So for the coming program, which will be in Dakar, it's going to be 2 weeks of startups spending time in Dakar, but the rest of the time they have the choice to actually go virtual and work from wherever they are. So now the world has really adapted to what startups have been talking about all the time. Things do not always need to be traditional. You can always have innovative ways of tackling different issues, such as working.
So if you were to do a prediction or call it a forecast on the future of startups on the continent, be it the next 5 years, be it the next 7 years, what would you say?
I think Africa is going to do much more than they've been doing. I know we're very excited that last year there was a 4 billion raise. We still have a lot of things to be doing, but things are looking good. And especially for women founders, I'm really impressed by the amount of women who are taking up space in the tech ecosystem. So that progress is something that is very important. Also very excited that founders for big companies like Flutterwave, companies that have been doing well, are also funding the smaller guys. So if you even look at Silicon Valley, that's what built it. So we are on the right trajectory when it comes to developing the continent.
So with that being said, and before I even let you go, Jocelyn, for our audience back home who's watching and they feel like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been looking for. How do they reach you? How do they sign up for, Startup Bootcamp, Afritech Accelerator program? Just give us a little detail of how to go about that.
Okay, so we are on social media as SBC Afritech or Startup Bootcamp Afritech on LinkedIn. So you can follow us. There's updates there where we even have links on how to apply. The deadline for applications is the 28th of January. So the quicker you do it, the better. And we'll see you in Dakar if you make it.
Thank you so much for making time to have such an amazing conversation with us. So if you're a startup owner, if this is exactly what you've been looking for, you've had it here first. Unfortunately, this is all the time we had for you today on Metropole Business Center. Thank you so much for watching. Don't go anywhere because we'll be right back with Metropole News at 1.